Hello. I hope you guys are having a great Monday. We are going to be talking about AI again. I know it's probably been like a month since the last time I spoke about AI, but I definitely want to bring it up now, especially since in a recent bulletin it was brought up. And from what I see, it's in the Archdiocese of Detroit. An article on AI from someone who does who's part of a research organization on AI. So I'm very skeptical about the responses. I didn't like the responses. The responses did come off as a bit. It's one of those things where when you're reading and you understand the context of what's being talked about, and a person seems to give these answers that suggest they know what's going on, and because they know what's going on, there's this impression that everything's going to be okay. The problem is that the answers given are not exhaustive, and there's some fallacies that are kind of exposed in the article that I wanted to talk about. Simply because I'm kind of sick of AI being treated either as some ridiculous business scheme, silver bullet, and or on the opposite end, oh, we don't have anything to worry about, as if it's just like a benign problem that people are losing their jobs over. Like that, it's all stupid. Like both of those extremes are bad. Because it doesn't hit the nuance of the problem. It hits the let's make this as simple an answer from my particular viewpoint as possible, and that's what I don't like. So we're going to be going into that article. We're going to be going into the Archdiocese Detroit article on it, and I'm going to rip it apart. So that's what I'm going to do. And who am I to rip it apart? Are you just some Catholic? If you haven't seen me before, I'm a statistician. So I'm familiar with AI because of my job, but I am not directly working on AI as a part of my job. So it may sound a little confusing, but AI is not something that is unknown to me. It is a subset, really, it's a subset of statistics. It's a bunch of algorithms mashed together to give a probabilistic model that's trained on previous data. Like that's essentially what AI is. And the AI responds to a variety of means, depending on what you're applying it to. If you're applying it to AI to cars, well, it's going to respond based on a particular sensory inputs. If you're talking about GPT, you're going to be talking about like an actual pseudo conversation that's happening and taking place. All those models have, they're trained, meaning there's a test in what happens where the algorithms are trained. So without further ado, let's get into it just a little bit. Let's see. I actually forgot to set this up beforehand. So you're just going to have to deal with it for a second. So thank you for being patient. So this is written by the Unleash the Gospel team. Wow, they really don't have some. Okay. All right. Local AI researcher. Okay, here we go. What every Catholic missionary disciple needs to know about AI. So it's a pretty the title itself is pretty big, right? So it's not like a small thing. Like it's saying as Catholics, this is what we need to know. So let's get into it. The person they talked to, his name is Jeffrey Quasnell, and he is the founder of NOAS Research, an open source AI research group with a focus on artificial intelligence and machine learning in the technology sector. So he seems to be a practicing Catholic. I think that's what they're trying to establish here. And he attests that when it comes to AI, we have nothing to fear. And I just want to point out, that is not the way to start an article on AI. I know a lot of people will be like, Well, we don't have anything to fear. AI is simply a tool. Like, you'll have a lot of people who will have that response. But then you'll have a lot of people who have actually lost their jobs because AI was misappropriated within the business that they worked for. And the business department, in trying to cut corners and save money, decided to apply AI in an inappropriate fashion, and then they lost their jobs. So you shouldn't be afraid. Obviously, you should still trust in God, and that's what he says at the end. Like, in Jesus, we have nothing to fear, and he's absolutely correct. That doesn't mean you shouldn't recognize the real problems and quality of life issues that AI will pose, and that is the concern that affects a lot of people, including Catholics. And so that's why I have a problem. Like, we haven't even technically gone into anything definitive, but like, from the get-go, like, that's a huge hang up for me. Because yeah, that's a huge hang up for me. So he explains what artificial intelligence is. There's nothing problematic there. Let's see. What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions surrounding AI? So this article here, I need to say this before. This article was written July 3rd, 2024. No, it's not the phrasing from the editor. He says it at the very bottom. In Jesus, we have nothing to fear, which is an absolutely true statement. But what it does is it belittles the situation, right? Like, if I were to come to you and I said, you lost everything, right? Like, if we went with Job and you weren't able to pay for your family, and I just came up to you and said, in everything we have nothing to fear in God. That is a true statement, and you're trying to counsel a person, but you're not actually doing anything to help that person, right? Like, so, like, which is wrong. Like, if you're going to do words of comfort, you should also follow it up with action, especially when someone has lost a significant what do you call it? Something significant, like a job, like the means to pay for their mortgage and feed their family. And so, like, this is happening right now. Like, people are losing their jobs to AI because, for a variety of reasons, whether AI is making their jobs no longer reasonable to be done by a person, or because the business itself is misapplying the technology. So let's see. All right. So here, AI is so he's artificial. Let's see what. Sorry, I got to back up a little bit. Let's see. What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions surrounding AI? So Jeffrey goes and says, one of the bigger misconceptions I encounter from people is that AIs are constantly learning from them, and that is not the case. Take ChatGPT, for example. It's disembodied in the sense that you talk to it once and it gives you an answer, and the next time you talk to it, it has complete amnesia about everything that's happened before. It does not update or change itself at all based on the interactions that people have with it. It's as if it's frozen in time because it's a brain that learns exactly nothing. So, and the reason why I wanted to bring up the time, like July, right, like, is because we're actually past this point. Like, AI, we do have adaptive AI, right? Like, we do have it where you can train a model and then it starts taking in new information. And we're, like, just like with iPhones, like, every 6 months a new iPhone comes out. Like, we're kind of at that point with AI. AI is growing really fast, and depending on what we're talking about, adapts pretty well. Like, if we're talking AI cars, like, AI cars out of necessity need to adapt to new information, or they have a bunch of car accidents. Like, that has to happen, or the cars are going to crash. So like, it depends on what we're talking about, and maybe not ChatGPT specifically has that situation, but we do have adaptive AI that does take in new information and will adjust its parameters based on that. And so that's more or less that it's slightly out of date. Does every AI do that? No, it doesn't. A lot of the AI is exactly what he says, but we're past the point where that's it. Let's see. Oh yeah, here it is. The training. All right, so he talks about training. Now come to like. All right, so you're talking about. So you're saying AI won't take over the world. So I talk to a lot of people about my work in AI, and it usually goes down one of two ways. They say, well, that's kind of interesting and kind of scary. And they ask me if the AIs are going to take over the world. That seems to be the first thing that people jump to. I always tell them it's a very unlikely scenario. And I agree with him. Like, I don't think he's wrong there. The big thing I really want to discourage is jumping to the fear of AI becoming sentient and taking over. I would like to remind people that almost anything could happen, right? You can take almost any scenario in the future and imagine some chain of events that might lead to that. What we need to ask ourselves is what's likely to happen and what would happen if the necessary conditions for that to happen. And before we get to the future we fear, there must be all these intermediate steps. We just need to be responsible about regulating and legislating those intermediate steps as they happen. All right. So the biggest problem, I think, with this statement is the very real issue of China, right? Like, this is something that Elon Musk has talked about. This is something that a lot of people who are like the forerunners in AI right now are talking about, is that regulation is essential. The problem is that there are countries who don't care. And if there are countries who don't care, it doesn't matter how good your regulations are. There is a sense of like, it's the nuclear effect, where mutually assured destruction. So if my opponent has bigger weapons than me and can go farther and do more damage in something that looks smaller and smaller, that's a problem compared to what I have, because he's outgunning me, right? Like, and so in AI, there's a similar problem where if China has no restrictions on what's going on with AI and how it's being developed and utilized in the field, then there's a real problem in America with AI, cybersecurity, a number of situations where if we don't adapt to that level, then they're going to run us over, even if we do have the regulations in place. And so, and don't get me wrong, I'm not justifying doing something unethical or morally abhorrent. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the idea of, well, as long as we have regulation and everything's done ethically, like, it'll be fine. That is a very naive view of the world, like very naive. And it's time and time again when it comes to technology, especially technology that can be weaponized, that just you can't regulate it. It's going to be used against you. Like, and if it's going to be used against you, like, it's going to be used, like, it's simply just going to happen, right? Like, it's not a matter of if it happens, it's a matter of when at that point. It's kind of like the same thing in like cybersecurity, where cybersecurity, it's when, it's not when a company is going to be hacked, it's not if a company is going to be hacked, it's when that company is going to be hacked, right? Like, so it's about playing the probabilities on that angle, not on being 100% preventative. So let's see here. We got some, oh, hey. Yep, and yet tech companies are struggling to find workers. I can actually tell you, working for a tech company, it's because of stay-at-home work. A lot of them want to move people into the office, and so, including myself, I do not want to move into the office. I want to stay remote and work in my office here. And there's a lot of people who are like, nope, not going to do that. I'm not going to drive 1 hour one way or a half hour one way. And so that's causing a real problem now. And there's a variety of reasons why that's happening. Like they want to maintain a capital investment building, because if people aren't using it, the next person who wants to buy, I guess, will just think that it's worth less, even though it's like more money, or I'm sorry, not more money, but it's still like prime spot to sell a building for. Or there's a situation where companies will sign contracts with cities to be based in those cities, and if they don't bring in a certain amount of people into the office, that could be breaching their contract with the city, and so they may lose their tax stipends, however they're receiving them, and that causes a problem. So I know I just kind of gave like a little tangent of that, but I think um, it addresses exactly what you're talking about, because I do work in this field. I do not work on AI. I know about AI pretty well as a statistician, but I do not work with it myself on a daily basis. So so I'm still within that space. So I'm giving it to you. Let's see. Uh, so yes, technics worship is the paradigm in America. Nowhere else could the philosophy of pragmatism come forth from. See, I actually disagree with you. So I haven't brought this topic up in a while, but it is a topic that's relevant when we're talking about it, and that is the Protestant work ethic, right? And the reason why I haven't brought it up yet is because he references down the article the Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution was made very, like, basically, if there wasn't a Protestant work ethic, you would not have gotten to the same degree of success or non-success, depending on which angle you're looking at, that the Industrial Revolution has accomplished. And so I will get to that in a minute, but it is an important point. Well, right. And we did create the atom bomb after all, even with all of our regulations. And so when you have something that's very easy to abuse, like AI is very easy to get now, right? Like it's not like it's hard to get anymore. It used to be very hard. Now it's pretty easy. And when you get it and you put it in the wrong hands of the wrong business owner, all of a sudden, you've lost a whole bunch of people. Or in, the case of the CEO that was murdered, that what came before that was there was from my understanding, an AI designation to reject certain claims across a broad spectrum. And so it rejected a whole bunch of claims for a whole bunch of people. And then it led to, again, another problem. And it was more social in nature than the issue. And that's exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about like business decisions that are wrong or are morally problematic and may not use the AI appropriately. Like, he's talking about the Skynet issue in Terminator, right? The Skynet issue in Terminator is something that's a possibility, but it's like down the road and it requires a lot of things to build up to it, right? Like that we don't have in place right now. So like he's correct that that's kind of like pie in the sky, like pie in the sky worry. The issue that I have is that he takes like the extreme answers. Like there are real, like, nuanced reasons to be concerned about AI that are not these like almost gaslighting like positions. Like I would consider this a type of gaslighting if someone told me I'm concerned, or if I said I'm concerned about AI and this was their immediate response, right? I would consider that gaslighting, because I don't think that's something that will happen like right around the corner. And again, there's things that need to lead up to it. And he does kind of explain it that way, right? Like he says, in order for things to happen, there needs to be things in place and what's likely to happen. And so, he talks about it becoming sentient. It's not the problem of it becoming sentient, right? Like like just as a continuation of this thought, It's not the fact that it's sentient. That's not the line. The line is that it has access to enough material or enough resources to do something damaging. It doesn't need to be sentient. It just needs to be able to work off the previous coding. It's basically, think of it like dominoes, right? Like when you set up the dominoes, there may be points of free falling where you kind of like let the dominoes free fall, and depending on how the dominoes fall, it will then trigger another set of dominoes. Okay. Like it's something like that, where it's like there's a lot of access given to machines that do not think for themselves, but they're running off their own scripts, and that's all they're doing. Like the other thing, this is a pet peeve of mine, is the constant comparison to AI having a brain or having hallucinations. That's another one. Like I'm not going to get into this one, but like hallucinations is another one, where we create a bunch of psychological terms for what happens within trained models of AI, and then like we're like, oh yeah, like it's not a brain. It's like, well, no crap, it's not a brain. Like like you're just stop giving it like lingo that sounds like it is a brain. Like that's a pet peeve of mine. Well, right, and that's another thing, is like once war becomes involved, like you're absolutely correct. We didn't stop at any of the intermediate steps. Once war becomes involved, then all of a sudden, like the gloves are off, right? Like it doesn't matter, and so it's what can be utilized by AI that can get to that point. Right now, I don't think there's a lot that we can like off the top of our head have. I doubt that the president of the United States is going to use AI to like push nukes, right? Like that's a very unlikely circumstance. But there is, but the idea of denying a whole bunch of claims to millions of people that they should rightfully get, or get to a certain degree, right? Just because it's an AI, or people, for example, you spend an hour applying to a job on doesn't matter, say it's GM, Ford, Disney. I'm from Michigan, so that's why I use GM and Ford. Disney, Tesla, like literally anything. You spend an hour applying to it and you get an immediate response the next second. You have no access to talking to a person. You just get a rejection, and the rejection is just this generic rejection letter, right? Like, so like that's detrimental. I personally think emails in that regard have been detrimental, because you don't have anything. But that's a completely different point. Let's see. Getting a lot of chat, so I'm just like focusing on that for a second. Let's see. Yep. So a lot of companies are requiring people to come to the office to get them to quit. Amazon did that a few months ago. Right. So like there's a few companies that are currently doing that. And you can find them. Basically, look for any company. Like a lot of companies are doing exactly what you stated. Because if you lose 5% of your population that are your workers this way, it's not really a negative, or at least it's not seen as a negative to the public right now. It should. Everybody should understand this. Like everybody should understand that saying, say you have Ford or GM, like they both have tens of thousands of people that work for them, right? If they both were like, all right, everyone needs to come to the office 5 days a week, and nobody like worked prior to that, like in the office outside of like a few days here and there, well, now you've created a situation where you've congested the local traffic system, and you've made it actually dangerous for people to come to work. Like, and people don't think about this. Like if I'm driving a half hour and there are 10,000 people who are coming to work with me in that area, like that actually creates an increased risk of of driving accidents. And so, like, that's another thing nobody is talking about. But I actually used to work for as a contractor for GM, and I actually used to look up exactly that, which is driving accidents for them in relation to a bunch of engineering requests. So like that was fun. I had a lot of fun doing that job. Met a lot of great people there. Let's see, like, can't be certain nobody works for them when they start posting it. Let's see. All right, so the morning we're using. Yep, and that's, I mean, like, yeah, that's actually what it should be. Like, so like I got criticized by Father Eric for responding before reading these, so I apologize to Father Eric if he's listening to this. And later on, the mortgage company I work for uses AI in a lot of things, but it only uses it to simplify data processing and alert systems. Everything gets looked over by a human before submission. And for a lot of things, like, that's fine, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with helping people do jobs faster. But like, we're going to get to a point where AI does become more automated, like not automated, but like just using, I'll use cars again. Like in workshops, or I'm sorry, in manufacturing, you can very easily understand how a bunch of machines are going to replace people. A lot of them have, all right. So a lot of this has already taken place, but across the board in a lot of manufacturing fields where you have a system set up and it's mostly machines, where there was 50 people that were working there, you now have 2 people who oversee as the human person, making sure that everything is working correctly. And then in the back end, you have 2 coders. And so now you have 4 people who work there when there used to be 50. And so that's also a real concern in where people are losing their jobs. And now I'm not saying like every single job needs to be saved. Like, if we are able to create technology that does in fact like complement or replace people, like, that's unfortunately part of the promise of AI, right? Like, is that part of the promise of AI is that this will do what humans do. And we don't need to pay humans to do it. The business will have on the back end a few servers that run this thing. And then maybe, depending on the company, you have someone who's a human who looks at the final product, right, to make sure that everything's correct. But I totally think exactly like what you're describing, like that makes a lot of sense. Like, I don't see a problem with that whatsoever. It's just a matter of the, like, again, like the idea that AI is some kind of like, what is it, magic bullet, essentially. Or like he talks about, like, I skipped it, but like magic, like people, I think I don't think anybody actually looks at it as magic. I think what it looks like to a lot of business people is a silver bullet to reduce overhead. Like, it's not magic, it's just a silver bullet to deal with the fact that they have a bloated overhead because of, inflation or what have you. So all right. So let me get back to the article before I go back to chat. I really appreciate chat being as active. I'm just going to be backtracking a little. Wally Wuzzy, good movie. So it's someone to mention. So what are the real dangers of AI? So Jeffrey goes, what's on the horizon in AI, likely in a year or two, is the ability to do voice and images together with text. So, right, ChatGPT is a text chat box. All the research right now is in what are called multimodal link models, which is where AIs have been trained on audio and text and images, and the AI can produce these things together. So you'll start to see videos that are going to be highly realistic. And there will be a period of time coming pretty shortly where people are going to have to develop a pretty thick skin for not believing what they see. I don't know what's going to or how that's going to have an effect on people who don't have the sensibilities to discern what's real and what's not. No. It's not. Okay. We're going to go back to that statement because I do kind of, I find that, I find that statement to be a bit like elitist. This is something that is in the research community already right now and will come to market more and more throughout this year. I think by Christmas this year, there's going to be a highly advanced multimodal AI that are able to do voice and text and images at levels that are pretty difficult to detect. And what comes out of that remains to be seen. But I think people should be aware that they don't want to, they won't be able to trust as much as what they see, unfortunately. What I do tell people is that things they ought to be scared about when it comes to AR are sort of larger and softer social issues that something like this could bring. That to me is the actual danger, what this will do to our society at large, and it can be either a good thing or a bad thing. So let's go back to the statement. I don't know how that's going to have an effect on people who don't have the sensibilities to discern what's real and what's not. Okay, that absolutely seems like an elitist statement because most people who will see, say, for example, President Trump giving an order to attack a certain city that isn't actually happening, but done in AI with deepfakes, that's going to be really hard to not be able to discern unless you have a bunch of other assumptions going along with it. Like, for example, it comes from a no-name distribution TV channel. It comes from a known deepfake site. It comes from a known deepfake YouTube channel, or it because that's the problem, right? Like when you can do a deepfake of the president or some other world leader making a statement about what's going to happen that is not true, but is absolutely concerning, and then a country responds to that, it brings up what he's talking about at the end, which is the societal changes. But for a lot of people, deepfakes are going to become more and more of a problem. Or it's not just deepfakes, but just realistic AI, like he was talking about. Because what's going to happen is we're going to get to another layer of fake media. So or fraudulent media. So for example, when someone brings it, I'll bring in the Catholicism to this because I feel like that's lacking. We've been very tech focused right here, and I appreciate you guys staying while I talk about it. Is when you look at the Bible, people will say, all right, well, how can we trust the Bible, right? How can we trust the Bible going all the way back? Couldn't it have been forged? Couldn't it have been, faked in some way? And then you bring up maybe a photo, all right, well, could this photo have been faked? Yes. In fact, the ability to fake a photo has been around for decades. So you can't trust the photos that you necessarily see. And now we're getting to a point where we can't trust the video that we're seeing, moving live action video. And it all has the same problem, right? You're always going to have an issue of trust with direct sources now. And it used to just be, all right, well, video was the last refuge. It's really hard to mimic what's going on in real life in real time. But now that's going away. And we're going to have a real problem where am I here giving a conversation with my ums and uhs and, or did I train an AI model to, do everything that I'm doing now? And you're just happening, you just happen to see me like this, right? That's going to be a real problem in the future. And that's kind of what he's getting at. But again, this is this is going to have huge societal effects. And I consider him, what he stated, to be playing down that fact because he doesn't actually address anything I just stated. And at the time of this article, I've been watching, what was it? There was a guy that did deep fakes for the Lord of the Rings making fun of the Rings of Power, right? And it was like Gandalf and like that's his main guy that he deep fakes. And I was watching him for like a year or a year ago, more than a year ago, well before this happened. But it's like such a problem because in his case, what he was doing, he was taking on the image of an actor, and he was impersonating him, playing another part. And so, and then we've seen deep fakes in a variety of ways since then, and some of them have been funny, but like I would argue it's one of those technologies that shouldn't exist, because it is so detrimental to the trust that we have. That's part of our social contract. So, all right, I'm going to go back to chat for a second. Let's see here. No, I haven't looked into it yet. But since you immediately responded, has the most epistemological sound approach to AI out there. Unfortunately, it's in the service of pursuing American policy objectives that are anti-Christian. Oh, that's okay. I'm still gonna look into it, but like that's yeah, I'm definitely still gonna look into it. You definitely have my interest with it. Let's keep going down that road. So thanks, Uncatastrophe. I appreciate you posting this. Their latest earning calls was kind of bizarre. They were talking about a new opium war with China, a new Cold War, a new arms race, the superiority of the Western way of life, etc. Them's fighting words. All right. So, and then only makes sense because they are a symbiotic firm with the American regime. I think a firm that like that is genuinely the most tangible, dangerous use of AI. Yeah. There's a lot of that you just said that is tangibly bad. All right. So I'm going to skip down a little bit just because of what was being talked about. Let's see. All right. Right. So like, no, they've definitely become an issue if they. Okay, so I understand your argument about deepfakes only become an issue if we don't have free speech. The problem is that not everyone is online at the level of everyone else, right? And so if because there's a gradient scale within our society on how we observe what's real and what's not, when you start getting people who aren't online all the time and may not be able to discern deep fakes from non-deep fakes, that's going to become an issue as well. And we saw that in a variety of ways, not necessarily through deep fakes, but through COVID and the pushing down of information. So I totally get what you mean about like basically if we didn't have free speech, basically if it was like COVID, that you were only hearing one side of the story when it came to a number of issues, that would be a concern. And it absolutely is. The problem is I think that inherently like deep fakes inherently have the problem of being an issue, even within a free speech society. No, and I totally get it. Community notes on Twitter are really good. I haven't written them, but I know a lot of people who do write community notes, and so they're I totally get fact checking that way. Again, the problem is that not everybody is going to be online at that level. Let's see. Would you be opposed to AI being used in the government in all areas? No. So for example, I'll give you one. You're voting, right? Like voting obviously is a pretty big deal for America. If we didn't have voting, there would be an issue with who the current president is, And if we don't have safeguards in place, there are certain things that may become an issue. But there are ways of utilizing AI in the government that isn't at the same time like abusive of their ability. And I'm going to use a simple example. It's not even like AI necessarily, but it can be automated in that way. When people vote, you want to make sure that you're tallying votes of people who do not have the ability to vote, right? Like, so you have felons who are not able to vote. You have aliens who do not have citizenship, do not have the ability to vote. And being able to like put your name in a paper, like, I know, gosh, some people don't like this, but like there's a certain level of we need to make sure everyone who's voting is like a real person. But being able to take like a felon's name and tying it up to their vote in real time. And so you take, like, they vote, it goes through the machine buzzers off and says this is a invalid vote and does not count it or whatever. It doesn't necessarily even have to buzz off or whatever, right? But it's just more so for like the indication for this example. But it buzzes because it's saying that this is not a valid vote. It comes from a felon, and then it cites it to the people who are overseeing the voting booth. Because there are a lot of felons who vote and their votes are still counted because there's no way of deciphering who's actually a felon or not when they're voting outside of hopefully the local area having an up-to-date voting record. And like that's, potentially a problem. So yes, am I like, I don't know, I'm just throwing out an idea that could potentially happen that would probably cost more money than what we're currently using. Yes. But it would last a long time. So, because like you'd always have those checks. But yeah, AI is not inherently wrong to use in the government. I guess is my last thing. It's just like what Upside Down Man had stated. You can use it for data processing. It's not necessarily that big of a deal unless somebody is not double checking. And so that goes down to, well, how much trust do you have in a person double checking as opposed to a person doing every single one of those steps in between and doing it all correctly. So it's kind of, there's a cost benefit analysis there for that. So I like the question, Alex. Yes, that's typically like the one group, but there's also other people who are like my age, like I'm 37. They don't spend that much time like online. They go out, they touch grass, and then they get drunk. I'm just kidding. Like I have no idea. I honestly have a hard time understanding what local people my age do, because a lot of people my age also don't have kids at the level that we have. Like, we bring our baby somewhere and they're like, "Oh, is that your first?" And we're like, "No, it's our fifth." Like, and so it's kind of like you get a lot of wide eyes. So, hey, Mark, yeah, let's also consider that this means that basically any form of video evidence is now inadmissible in court. I don't know if you would go that far, but you might have a real problem with showing your evidence if you don't understand editing, and especially if you're a lawyer that doesn't understand editing. So there could be some things that give it away, but it depends on also what kind of evidence, what kind of video you're looking at, because not all video is the same. A dash cam for a police car is going to be different than a dash cam for my car, which is going to be different than my wife's phone videotaping something. Yeah, I absolutely think so too. I do think that for a lot of people, they don't know this, that they are uh, they are working themselves out of a job. I really do believe that, based off some of the progression that's happened in the fields, like in where I work, and then in other areas and conferences I've been to on AI. Um, so I really do believe that's a thing. Um, if tech workers are in trouble, everyone is. I can't think of another career path that would have been better in spite of everything. So if you're a politician, like it's really hard. It's really hard to be AI politician. It's more or less a bootlicker. Right? Like if you there's a lot of politicians that will follow the flow of things as opposed to establishing their own like critical thinking. But part of that can't be helped. That's a different conversation. So um let's see. The local I had to read, the average local grass toucher person in this country is affected by schizo OPs and disinformation. Oh man. Okay. All right. I'm gonna go back to the the article. Um, so how do you see this changing society? And he goes, the Industrial Revolution was either a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you look at it. It drastically improved the quality of life. Before the 1870s, nearly 90% of all Americans were employed in agriculture in some way, which meant they were essentially working so that they could eat and just meet their basic needs. It wasn't until the Industrial Revolution that, over the course of one generation, from the 1800s to the start of the World War II, okay, that's more like two to three generations, but that's you had 90% of the jobs get eliminated in that sense that only 10% of the population was in food production. So what it means is that the way of life of the majority of Americans was erased because of technology, and it had to be replaced, as it is likely that something like that will start to occur over the next several decades as AI becomes more prevalent. Right. But the problem with this is that I actually think it's fallacious. Like, I do not think that it's a one-to-one comparison, because technology, to get you from working out in the field to then bettering society in another way, um, is not necessarily the issue. The issue here is that AI has the intended goal to replace the human that's doing it, right? And so the better AI gets, the better the better AI that's made, the better jobs it's able to supplant, and the more people who are going to be affected. Now, it's probably not going to hit 80% of the people being completely removed from their jobs, right? Like I don't think that's going to happen. But again, I do think that the comparison is not the same, because the point of AI is not to simply help people do jobs, but to actually replace them. And so when we're not just talking about better machines and you need less people working to get all the food produced, right? Like, we're saying that no people, or maybe one person when there were hundreds of people, like like you could have it set up where, like, it's not possible now, but you have templates from thousands of engineers on how to develop a car, and the blueprints for a car. You have thousands of them within a company. Obviously, I'm from Michigan, so I'm using that as an example because we've got car dealer or car companies, and you train them through a model, and then you have them go through that model, or you have that model play out, asking for specific requests. Say I want a rainbow, I would like a rainbow color escape that has a V6 and a bunch of other specs, right? And then it produces some, exactly what I have or exactly what I stated. And then the engineer goes through those blueprints that it output to make sure that those blueprints are sound. And so you've taken something that took 10,000 people to do, right? And you've, basically had it go through a transformer. And then at the very end, you're making sure that there's one dude who reviews how well functionally and from a functional standpoint, as well from a um, uh, functional standpoint, but also from a sound standpoint. Like, is this a realistic, like, prototype that it output? That is something that it could be a possibility, in the next decade. Like, obviously, it's not something that can happen now. I think that's way too complex for what we have. But yeah, I mean, like, we have remix machines, right? Like, we already have remix machines. We do this with music right now. You can go to a bunch of AI apps that will take all the music in the world, like literally all the music in the world as their training, and just say, I never going to give you up in jazz, C major. I don't know, like, just start like listing a whole bunch of things, and it'll output something very similar depending on the model that you've purchased, because you still do have to purchase these um, or subscribe to them. And, it'll get pretty close. Like, it's not going to be perfect always. Uh, but there will definitely be a level of consistency um, when it comes to literally sampling the entire history of pop music in America. So, and we also do this with art. So it's like, I can go on Canva right now and put something in. It's not going to be the best thing, but it'll look decent. Uh, it will look like it was made by AI. But again, you have to also be able to look for that. I had one piece of AI made where it was, and you can find it in one of my videos, where it was Darth Vader reading the Bible, and it actually came out pretty good. Like, it wasn't the most complicated photo, but it was a photo that, again, like, I got exactly what I wanted. Vader reading the Bible. Um, yeah, the thing it came up with for the sign of peace was perfect too. Yeah, so um, so um, so he goes on to say, because I do want him to, I don't want to sell him short for what he says. We can ask ourselves, what are the good things coming out of this technology, and what are the bad pieces? I do notice that he says things in one thing and then pieces in another. It will probably commoditize some intellectual labor, some things that previously required people to do some sort of intellectual work, whether it's writing or summarizing a document, will no longer require a person to do that. This sounds a little bit scary, but what's interesting is that this has already happened many times throughout human history, even within our own lifespan. So that's true. Already, we've seen computers take what was previously intellectual work that humans had done, and have, like, for example, I'll just give you an example. Even in statistics, my field, it used to take like weeks to put pieces of paper into a computer to run one regression model. And obviously, we don't need to do that anymore. But it causes the problem that I think he's not addressing now, where people think that because they have numbers that, let's just say, have the same form, but do not have the same nature or assumptions built into the data, they think that they can run a regression model, that they don't need a statistician. They can just go ahead and run a regression model, or run a number of other models, because the nature of the data. I'm sorry. Yeah. the form of the data, such as numerical or categorical, fit what they're trying to analyze. But the assumptions themselves that are needed for those models to work are not present within the data, given the nature of the data, where they got their data, a number of issues. But basically, what I'm getting at is they treat it like a calculator. Very simple, and it can go through the numbers and it'll give you an output. And they have a very, baseline understanding of how to read like a p-value or something. And so they're like, this is statistically significant because these numbers went through this model and gave me a small p-value. And like that's not going to work. Like, and that causes problems in businesses. And AI has a similar problem to it, where it's very easy to think that you can just fit everything into AI, and then it causes a similar problem. All right, so so this is likely what is going to happen again within the new class of tasks. So rather than making specific predictions, what we should think about is what are the macro trends we've seen historically, when these classes of changes happen in society. Right. So like, he's not exactly wrong. The problem with using the Industrial Revolution is that the Industrial Revolution is in kind something very different. And the technology wasn't simply, let's just say, as transferable. Like, it's like the nature of the Industrial Revolution and the nature of what we're going through right now are different. And so assuming that the same things are going to happen because historically something society changing happened is again a fallacy, because they're not the same thing. Like for example, like the iPhone revolutionized a lot of things. It forced us, to the dismay of our math teachers growing up, to have a calculator in our pockets at all times, right? So like, and the access to every single thing on the internet at our fingertips at all times. Like, mixing that with AI, or like taking AI a step further, like, it isn't simply like we have these jobs that are like, what's the next thing when you can't have a tech job, right? Like, because going from agriculture to basically manufacturing to a white collar, data processor, right? Like, what happens when that chain is upended? Like, there's adaptions that need to happen for sure, but the intent of the new forms of work, I'm sorry, I need to reword this just a little bit. Like, the intent of AI, like I said, is to replace the human, not to simply be the helper of the human, right? Like, because it's not that the engineer is using AI to help him, it's the business owner is using AI to help the engineer for as long as he needs to, until the AI can do it himself or itself, right? Like, so there's two humans at play, bare minimum, when it comes to AI production within a company. And to think that that dynamic doesn't exist is, I think, very naive, and to not address it, again, especially in light of the fact that people have lost their jobs, in light of this, is very concerning. And coding is like, here's the problem: coding might not necessarily be like a safe place to be, because like, I know for a fact I can go to a number of AI models and write in, like, I use SAS, which is a statistical software. I can write in SAS code, or I can say, hey, write me a SAS code for a regression model with like, 5 or 6 variables, 5 or 6 dependent variables, and a few other specifications, and it can get me something pretty close. So that's a pretty concerning thing from my end, but it is something, again, that I think this article is very watered down, and um, telling people, well, these are just simply general trends that will happen and they'll go in a particular direction, is a problem, because you don't know if it'll go in that particular direction. Like, you think so now, but also, like, I'm gonna point out the glaring issue, um, is the conflict of interest in you stating this as someone who works for AI. Like, that is what you do. And so you may have a bias that you're not accounting for, or that you're not addressing. And so I do have issue with that. Like, when you ask experts in field, like in a field of that's up and coming, hey, do you think this is a concern? Yeah, the answer is always going to be no, because that's what they're into right now, and they're, like, that's just like that, from a societal thing. That's what people do. Like, and they tend to do that, and it's very rare that someone comes out and is like especially with like Elon Musk, where he comes out like, yeah, AI needs to be relegated or regulated. And that's a pretty surprising thing for him to say publicly, given what a lot of people feel about it. And so I know he's been saying that for years, and I know the window is shifted a little, where like most people do in fact look at AI should having, it should have regulations. But again, like, you just have those problems of other governments just not caring, being a really big issue. So I actually brought up something with my wife. I'm like, imagine an AI that was in charge of a certain, like, energy, or not. Imagine AI with a certain disposition stated within itself that was very green or climate change heavy, where it was like humans are the problem. And um, you might see a very real problem with that AI, depending on what it's in charge of. Because just like how humans, like, you can instill a certain disposition within, like, a model, even if it's trained. So you get it trained, and then you can also adapt it to have certain parameters. And, say, for example, it's like man-made climate change is a problem. It's like, and you're dealing with forestry, and you're dealing with a number of other issues, or you're asking the question, should you know this problem? Yes or no? Or, I'm sorry, I totally messed up, Mark. I'm totally, because, like, I'd spoken to Mark about this earlier, and he brought up a perfect example of something very concerning, that an AI model knew information it shouldn't have known, and it told the person asking the question it did not know that answer, but on the back end they were able to see that it did, which is very concerning. Like, um let's go here. We're going through deindustrialization, takeover by finance capital. I agree with you. I totally agree with you. And finance capital is not going to let go of AI for back testing technical analysis strategies and collecting data for investing. Yep. I couldn't agree more. The owner is looking for replacing the engineer or worker. Then after that, the business owner wants the power money while not needing to pay for labor. I mean, basically, like, it's what's the number one thing for YouTube people that they want? They want passive income. So you put up a video, and you make money on that video. You don't have to put any labor into it, but the AI churns it out to people, and you get paid money based on that. The ironic thing is, I've done that. Like, I have a statistics channel that I teach, and I haven't put a video up in a year. I need to put up another video, but it is something that I've done, where I'm just getting passive money from something I did over a year ago. and it's not like a small amount. Like I have to pay taxes on it this year, but well, okay, it's not. I don't want to say it's like it's only like a couple $1,000s. Like that's approximately what it is. It comes out to be about $2,000. Um, and so like this idea of doing that on a massive scale for a company where like the people in charge don't need to actually do anything and just let AI do everything. Like tell me a scenario where someone would not want to do that besides boredom, like just being utterly bored on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, I would agree with that. I would not make rash career decisions either, based on AI. Um, but it definitely should be within the calculation, like what you're looking into. Uh, let's see. Sorry, just reading you guys because you got more comments. Congrats on it. Yeah, thank you. Congrats on having to pay taxes on earnings. That's awesome. Again, it's only like a couple $1,000s. It's not like I don't want to give the impression I'm making like I'm able to support. Support myself with it. I can't. If I was making like hundreds of thousands of dollars, sure, but I can't do that. All right, so let's get to the rest of this article. When you say proof of humanity, I feel like the probability of one of these things really at the core of it, a lot of the fear surrounding this for a lot of people. Do you have any examples of how AI has failed the proof of humanity? I would say almost all of it. We have not seen a widespread demonstration of some resemblance of sentience. I say this as someone who loves the technology and thinks it can be transformative, but I would not over represent it's been able to do. I know there's a lot of fear around what AI could be, but I would say we're pretty far away from the world where that's going to be an immediate case, but it's good to start thinking about it now. So I agree with him in this particular example on sentience. I think it's kind of an overused one because of Transformers, or not Transformers. Well, I guess in a way, Transformers, but Terminator. Man, can you imagine Transformers? Like that'd be interesting. I didn't even think about that. I really just focused on Terminator when it comes to the extreme examples. All right. So, do you have any concerns that human flourishing might not be at the core of technological advancements? So, uh, okay. I don't know if I want to read all of this only because we've kind of addressed this ourselves, where like the focus isn't necessarily like human flourishing has a lot of definitions, and there is one from a Catholic perspective, which he says, he goes into um, that the world has many answers. Here, all right, I'll read this from this part. The world has many answers, many different answers, and they don't even know what their answer is. I agree totally with that. That's where the confusion and the dangers ultimately lie. I think that God designed a universe that encourages cultivation and advancement. I also agree. From the beginning of Genesis, we're told of fruitful and multiplying to fill the earth and subdue it. So already we see humans taking the fruits of nature and using them to build themselves up in some aspect that is at least not morally evil. It may not be a net neutral, but I would even argue that it's actually a good that God constructed the universe in the way it is. I mean, like, I think most Catholics would agree that the way that God constructed the universe would be good. I don't want to give the impression that I'm like against this guy, like on everything he says. Like I'm not. I just do think that there are times when he plays it down, and that's why I'm doing this, because um, this is something that I'm knowledgeable about, that I work alongside with, and the answers I found on my archdiocese website to be lacking in certain areas. So let's go with. But again, like that's not to say I don't agree with him on most of things he says, because in fact most of the things he says I do agree with him, especially when it comes to theology, theological parts here, because that's how I understand myself as a scientist in relation to the world. Is I'm a scientist looking through the lens with God, right? Like that's how I view the world. He created electricity as one of the four fundamental forces in the universe, and so we don't see God restricting the advancement of technology as an evil within itself, correct? Even our gospel reading from this last week was the talent parable. We're told to take what we have and to make more of it within the context of God's ultimate plan for us. And God's ultimate plan for us is to have abundant life through Jesus, right? So obviously correct. Like in agreement, I don't want to say correct like I'm some sort of authority on this particular part. That's where we part ways perhaps with other people in the world, because some people would say that human flourishing just means more wealth and more resources, and we believe flourishing is an abundant life in Jesus. Correct. If we're not fulfilling all of that towards abundant life in Jesus, then it's all for naught, in fact, and it's all for evil. Think of it, the Tower of Babel. In Genesis, we see the ancient people are building this tower up to heaven, a metaphor for construction and technology. Building a tower at that time in the ancient Near East was very difficult. It took tons of labor to do, and so that is a representation of man taking the world and building something out of technology from it. And God does not say that building the tower is evil. The tower itself was not the evil thing. The evil thing was the desire to reach to heaven and to be able to make themselves like God. When we try to subvert the will of God with technology and view that as the definition of flourishing, that's where I think there's trouble, but I think we can use the technology we have today as long as it ultimately drives us towards having a more fulfilling life in Jesus. And that's where I'm going to bring up the Protestant work ethic, because that's something that needs to, if we as Catholics, and I've talked about this in other ways, in other videos, that we as Catholics have a problem with like days of obligation, fasting, ember days, feast days. Like we don't quite understand what they are anymore because we've completely removed that aspect of our disciplines out from us, right? Like we don't have a proper understanding of feast days, of fast days. We just kind of say, well, Good Friday and Ash Wednesday, they're fasts, and they're the light fast, like they're the one meal to with two other meals that are not as big as the one meal. And so like there's a problem with the fact that we like really only have two days in which we actually apply that asceticism. And historically speaking, we had like 160. So like, and it wasn't just fasting, but it was feasting. It was fasting, feasting, holy days of obligation, which is a solemnity. You have ember days, which which happen 4 times a year. You have these ways of life that we no longer do because of the Protestant work ethic. And in particular, it's the appreciation of leisure. And it's not doing nothing, but the ability to, like what Jeffrey had stated, to appreciate and drive towards God, and to do that to our fullest. What AI, ironically, in a twist, does is that it has the potential to help us get there if we're able to maneuver it correctly. Do I expect a whole bunch of people to like work with me to do this? No, not really. But it is something. So I will get to that in a second. Socks on my feet. I will get to that in a second. But AI would actually help with reducing the amount of days in which we work, right? Like, because like that's the biggest problem that we have, I think, for a lot of people, is for a lot of blue collar and white collar jobs, you come in 40 hours a week or more, and you work 5 days a week or more, and you realistically, like, you shouldn't. Like, you should probably be working about 3. Like, if we're going to look at how, like, 3 to 4, and those 3 to 4 days could be helped with having AI. And AI could help with human flourishing in that capacity. Where on, say, like on a Friday, you work 4 days. On a Friday, AI takes over. And then on Monday, You come in, you check what the AI did, and then you continue, right? Or, I'm saying like assuming nothing changes liturgically, because I would within our liturgical calendar, because I would love it for our it would suck. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to pretend like it wouldn't suck. It absolutely would suck because I do not have that conditioning. But the idea of bringing back feast days, fast days, solemnities in the way that we used to, and to actually build up our culture and not treat work like it's sacred. And so like that gets back to socks on my feet. Gosh, I just now got that. I'm sorry. Work ethic turned every job into a vocation. Right. Every job is not a vocation. It is not like a job is not sacred. Like a vocation is sacred. My wife and I are in a marriage. That is a vocation. That is sacred. My priest is in a vocation. That is sacred. My ability to do like statistical manipulations and data cleaning is not. It's profane in the most in the most obvious sense. Work is profane. It is not sacred. And that's okay. It doesn't need to be sacred. Yes, you get a lot of things done. Yes, you work for a lot of things. Like I work for my family. But we were told we were going to do that in the garden. Right? Like that was a curse. But like that doesn't necessarily that doesn't mean it's holy though. It means that it's something that we got to do. So, and again, it is by definition the most profane thing we do is work. So I'm glad you brought it up. Socks on my feet. Right. Except it won't, because they'll just see you can do more work in the same time. And that's where the bishops, like we really need help with the bishops. And it has to do with if you reiterate fast days, feast days, ember days, like all 10 holy days of obligation, as according to canon law, that we will by necessity have to bring this up to our employers. And for some of us, that's going to be really easy. For others, it's going to really suck. But you know what it's going to also do? It's going to help us as a culture, as a group of people who are following the same way. We will be able to notice this. And I don't know how else to say it. It's going to sound, it's going to sound hopeful, but it is hope in the body of Christ, is that we act accordingly and we start going into villages and towns and cities in the ways that we used to help support each other. And that we actually enacted real charity as opposed to everything going through the government. So like it's totally not gonna be easy. But having owners of companies that understand and appreciate and maybe themselves practice Catholic work ethics, the appreciation of leisure, that we work to rest, not rest to work. Like that's a very real distinction that needs to come out for that to happen. So I totally get what you're saying. So yeah, let's all consider that the reality is most people don't have 5 days of actually valued added work. Most office work is about 60% of busy work meant to push data from one place to another. Yes. But so I this is kind of like a high end. Like if you're working as like a fast food employee, obviously the dynamic changes. But like even that, like let's sit on that for a second. Like AI is going to be a problem for that group, because I already prefer to order from a machine because it's faster and I don't have to wait for the guy to do push buttons that I can do, right? But now it's just a matter of, all right, who's going to make the burgers? Who's going to make the fries, right? Like, and so if that has to be people, like, it'll be people. But if in the next 5 years they come up with something to deal with that, now that they've got the cashier issue done, well, that's another issue, right? Like, and we're going to have more people out of work from there. And that's going to cover a lot of businesses. Like we got Burger King, Wendy's, Sonic, McDonald's, Taco Bell. Like you can just going through them. Like once they get to a point where they can make those items without the people, like those people are going to be gone. And the managers are going to be the only ones that are there to make sure that everything's running. Meanwhile, I just really want to be a vegetable farmer and fix things for trading materials. So there's some nuance to the idea that work is profane. Certainly, most jobs aren't holy in themselves, but there is a chance to encounter God in our coworkers through the work itself. Well, absolutely. But I do also, absolutely, Thomas, and like I do agree with that. But like that's true for everything. Like the idea though that it's sacred and it pushes people to stay to work 80-hour weeks when they have 3 kids at home, and they prioritize their job over their family. Like that's where that leads to. And that's really what I'm getting at, because in the field that I work in, you see that a lot. Like you see where a lot of people will throw themselves not at their families, but at their work. And I agree there is nuance, but it's I think that nuance is, I mean, it's not that it's not important. It's that I don't want to say it's like too little too late. Like it still makes it profane, right? It's just a matter of like in everything we're supposed to find God. Like in every encounter of like when you go to the store, when you're buying groceries, like you should be able to encounter God through the people that you work, like that you buy things from, right? Like, and so it's that's like a universal thing. And so like to apply it in that way in work, well, the nuance, okay, so I will say this. The nuance is important because that's the thing that you're doing the most. And you should see that, or else some people are going to literally like lose their mind. Not for the sake of losing their mind, but should be emphasized for exactly why you emphasized it, because they should recognize there is a level there that they can encounter God through their coworkers, like you said. So sorry, I just had to think about it for a second. So thank you. But sometimes that worker knows how to push the right buttons to make you something crazy, like a taco at a Wendy's. Okay, she did that. That's why she's. Yep. Well, in fact, I actually think there will be a massive reduction for the sake of more money. There will be a massive reduction in what we see in fast food menus, exactly because of that. All right, let me just finish this article. I'm trying to get him to where he's like, all right, what should a Catholic be aware of? I would tell people that things we need to look out for are things that will be that will exacerbate the dehumanization that already exists within our society, things that blur the lines between what is a person and what is not a person. As Catholics, we have things that we have to hold sacred, while the church has not offered any definitive guidance, such as here's the red line that we do not cross. The larger body of Catholic social teaching can give us the broad strokes that we need to be thinking about it. The dignity of the human person is always at the center of Catholic social teaching, and insofar as we believe that Catholic social teaching will bring forward the best culture and the best humanity that we will have, and insofar as AI could allow us to go further away from that, well, then that's the areas that we need to be concerned about. This could be something such as AI girlfriends, which, by the way, like, I've had to block so many ads on YouTube advertising that exact thing. Because I'm a guy, and because YouTube is more guy focused than woman focused, you get a bunch of AI girlfriend application, like imprints. Basically they're the commercials, advertisements. There we go. I'm sorry, it's getting late. It's almost 10:30. I have to go to bed soon. So just letting you know. Things that further remove people from a place where they should be, which is engaging with the fellow man and having a real personal relationships with them, such as touching grass, right? Insofar as AI can move people away from that, that will be the sort of thing that will cause society to be worse off. The core questions I think that we're going to be butting up against would be the question of the importance and the specialness of human life. Right. So like we haven't even talked about like the human, oh my gosh, I can't even remember, but basically where they want to make your brain into a computer. Like instead of dying normally, they want to upload their consciousness to a computer and live through the computer for the rest of their lives, however that long that lasts. And it's like, I forget what you call them, but they're a real group of people that are looking towards the destruction of the human race. It's not an android. It's not an android. I used to talk it at one of my previous jobs because the guy would always bring it up. And I wasn't surprised that he was an atheist. And but it's basically this idea of being able to capture our souls in a computer and living out your life in a computer, even though you'll still actually die. like there's there's so many problems with that, but it's a real thing that's being promoted. Let's see. Thank you, Ian. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Transhumanism. Oh my gosh. But yeah, that's a if you're for transhumanism, you're actually like by necessity you're against humans like flourishing. You're for throwing us in a box called computer. And like there's no technology that even supports that, but there are absolutely people who want to push us in that direction. Yeah, thank you, Ian. I appreciate that. So all right, sorry, I'm also just getting over something. So we as human beings have been made in the image and likeness of God. We have a soul that is unique and special, imbued by God at the time of creation, and it cannot be replicated by any sort of technology, and that is something that we need to be able to synthesize. But what we shouldn't do is project from an aspect of fear. No. See, okay. That is the other thing is like, I don't like how he jumps to fear as opposed to concern, right? Like he kind of used pretty extreme examples, like, again, Terminator, like that's a pretty extreme example. The most of the people on the block losing their jobs because, all the area like tech jobs got replaced by AI. Like that's kind of a big deal. And that is something certainly to be concerned about. And I wish he would actually address them. And so, like, this idea of fear, like, technically correct, right? Like, you shouldn't be doing it from fear, you should be doing it from concern. And even though, like, I would argue how most people view it would be the same um, in this context. Equipped with knowledge and equipped with that certainty, we can tackle this and use this technology for the betterment of our brother and know where the boundaries are. See, like, the problem, though, in this area, equipped with knowledge and equipped with that certainty. Okay, cool. What if you don't work in the tech area? Like, how can you do it? Like, how can you deal with that? So, like, if you don't work in tech, how do you deal with AI? If you don't know about tech, uh, or I'm sorry, if you don't know about AI in an intimate way or in a way close enough to be able um, to understand the basics, like, how do you deal with that? And for a lot of people, like, does that mean that AI has to necessarily be a course in school? Is that something that we need to appeal to um, within our current system? Which, by the way, I didn't mention this, but our school system is based on the Industrial Revolution, and I would definitely say that our school system, the K through 12, um, is not great. It's pretty bad, um, and we should have changed it a long time ago. Um, but like that's my opinion. I do not homeschool my kids, so like that's another thing. I do not do that. But it definitely that's a result of the Industrial Revolution that we're still dealing with. All right, so how do you think Catholics should respond? As Catholics, we're called to be active participants within the scientific community. We are not meant to be hermits that say, "Oh well, that bad thing's going to happen, so we're not going to engage in it." Right? Like that's kind of ironic that this is stated in such a way because like there are parts of this where he like he doesn't mention like the more practical problems that people are dealing with. He mentions like the extreme whatever. All right. So um and then like yeah, whatever. All right. So for someone like me who can work in this field and who can make contributions, I find it imperative that Catholics need to be at the forefront. I need to be there saying, here's what we need to do because just sticking our head in the sand is not the proper response. Yes and no. Um, but mostly yes. So like I agree, like we definitely should be at the table when it comes to the ethics discussions. Um, especially and I so definitely that. If you had to give your 30-second pitch on AI skeptics, what would you say? I would say it can help make your life easier and better, and that's really the measure of any technology or product from a business standpoint. And does it make your life easier and better? If it does, then great. If it doesn't, then why are we even talking? So that's the very pitch. That is not here. That it is not here to replace you. It is not here to take over you. It is here to make your life easier and better. Okay, so he clearly believes that it's like AI like being developed is not there to replace people, and that's clearly a fundamental assumption that is wrong. That it's just wrong, because again, you're not just looking at the computer engineer doing the coding or the statistician doing the coding for AI. You also have to look at the business owner and the intent of the business owner when the AI system is up to a certain standard. What is that business owner going to do with that engineer or statistician when the AI is at a certain level? Is he going to let him go? The answer, it's not always yes, but it is yes enough that it's concerning. So I'm again like that's like my like I mean there's a bunch of major things I've already talked about, but um all right, so same fear is wise. Some fear is wise. Yes. Um, yes. Uh, indeed, he sets up a straw man and then claims that fear is unnecessary. That can't be ignored here because he fails to address the truly valid concerns. Um, or I don't want to say he doesn't address the truly valid concerns outright. I think what he does is he kind of throws them up to, well, we can't solve any specific issue. And it's like if you're trying to bring comfort to a group of people, saying we can't address any specific issue, but there are societal changes. And so societal changes becomes this like place where people are just like, this is where a bunch of information goes, and you may not actually be able to extract anything. And especially since he didn't get specific into the societal changes to the level that people are concerned about, like for example, sorry, I am getting over something. He brought up the Industrial Revolution and suggests that this current revolution with AI is going to have a similar effect, that people are going to like lose their jobs, but also like transition into new ones. That's not really addressing the transition, right? Like that's addressing a societal change you expect to happen based on, again, something that is not in kind the same thing. And so like it is a societal change based off technology, but the intent of the technology is different. The Industrial Revolution was not about omitting like workers. They wanted more workers to produce the things that they had available given the new technology they had. It was actually the complete opposite. They wanted more people to work for them because they needed more people to work for them for things to get done, which is the complete opposite of the AI that's happening now. Easier and better is a terrible standard for new technology. Quality and other factors are important too. This is why all schools should teach philosophy. I agree with you. And I just want to be like, he went to Sacred Heart. So like he went to a seminary, and it stated at the very beginning, I don't know how long you've been paying attention, Thomas. Or I'm sorry, not paying attention, but have been in the chat. So he was part of Sacred Heart, and it said at the very beginning, it's just, yeah, I agree. Like philosophy should be a required class again. Absolutely. Do you have some examples of how AI will make our lives easier and better? I think that it will benefit us in ways that skeptics don't see. I'm trying to be charitable, guys. Like there will be a massive advancements in the education system to the detriment of everyone having ADHD. Like that, I don't know how much that I can like that. That's going to be an actual problem where everyone uses screens, and because everyone uses screens, there's an ADHD problem that becomes conditioned on the population because they have a screen in their face. And we already know scientifically that having a screen in your face is not good for you, for your memory. And so that's totally going to happen. For example, because of AI, imagine a teacher who knew everything and could spend all day with just one student. That sounds terrible. There will be tutors specifically tailored to learning along with the individual students, knows what their problems are, and be able to ask them novel questions that cut in the heart of where they're having trouble with a concept. This is very much within the realm of where we are with AI today. And then we're going to have a bunch of people who treat everything like a math problem, and that's not what's called for. Like that's not appropriate. I was really great at math, right? Like I'm like really great at math. Not everything's a math problem. Not everything can be seen like a math problem. And this whole paragraph kind of comes off that way. Where it's like, well, it's just about formulas, calculations, and like scientific concepts. But like, you want to talk about different poems, like we'll just have the what is it? Like we'll just have the AI read off a description of what a particular poem is, like maybe a haiku because it's like really formulaic. Again, like, okay. In healthcare, oh my gosh. Okay. In healthcare, there are a lot of ways. This was done in July, by the way. He had no idea. I'm just emphasizing this right now. He had no idea. In healthcare, there are a lot of ways we can use AI to augment human abilities in decision-making processes and in diagnosis. Okay, you want your doctor to catch the 1 in a million thing that they just had never been exposed to. Okay, though that's a good angle. Obviously, they didn't know about, but it is applicable to you. The AI has the ability to pinpoint very specific rare conditions that the doctor you happen to go to at the time would not have been able to do. So that's a very good example that he uses. But obviously, like we brought up a previous example, that is the problem. Well, I agree with you, but Sacred Heart's fairly like, I'm actually surprised. Because like our like I am surprised. Um Now that being said, like when it said that he went to Sacred Heart, it didn't really specify for what. I'll go to the top to make sure, but that is a um what is it? That is a good point. Uh and then he goes, through Jesus we have nothing to fear. It's all going to be okay. Okay. Again, like I do think okay, encountering artificial intelligence by the AI research group for the Center of Digital Culture from the Holy See. So again, like this may be, and you can call me out, like because I'm being critical of him because he published a major work, and given that I work closely to the similar concept, similar thing that he talked about, um, or the thing I work closely, not in it but alongside it. Talking about it is not necessarily a problem for me. So I didn't contact him directly. I didn't go out and say, "Hey, Jeffrey, like this is what I thought about your article" directly. I did not do that, and that is because if something is, and this goes back to the when you critique someone's work, you critique it in a medium similar to what it was critiqued in, and so, or I'm sorry, what it was published in. So I did not write an article. I could have written an article. Instead of writing an article, I gave my words as I was like, the article would have came out better by far if I did that. But I decided to do a video, so like that's why I did this. Um, Again, I agree with a lot of what he says. Like obviously all the technical stuff, I agree. Uh, that's up to date for this article, and a lot of the theology, except for at the very end, which is what Thomas had brought up about the standards being clearly an issue. Um, but let's see here. He's a former student at Sacred Heart Major Seminary. So I don't know what that means. Former student. So does that mean he was a seminarian? He took one class. He took a few classes. If he's working in AI, he probably didn't go there for science. So it may have been something that he did later on. So I don't know. This would actually be something I would love to have a conversation with. Well, whatever. There's a bunch of people I'd love to have a conversation with. It's whether or not they'd actually do it. So the last thing I want to point out is, all right, so that was it. Again, like there wasn't this animosity towards Jeffrey himself. There's just the critiques of some of his points, and some of his points seemingly lacking their target audience. I don't know how else to say that. It just seemed like the target audience was lacking in specificity, like the specificity that he had. So the last thing I wanted to bring up was you can't really see him in that angle. Dang it. Okay. Okay. You see here? Do you see up over? There's like a little priest there. All right. I'm just gonna bring him down. So this is Father Paul, and this was gifted to me by Shining Light Dolls. And so he was wearing white today because liturgically he's wearing white. If he had to wear green, he'd be wearing green. If he had to be wearing purple, he'd be wearing purple. I've got all of them but black and rose, the vestments for for Father Paul. So this is obviously something that should be played with kids for the focus, and it's to help them with understanding the liturgical calendar. And so that's something that we're going to probably be doing in a variety of ways with this, with Father Paul. I think it's a really helpful way of doing showcasing that to our kids. And on top of that, they've got a book that came along with it, The Sunday Best: How Priests Are Dressed. And it goes over the daily clerical clothes. It explains like the alb and the stole, and goes into great detail, right? And so I know it turned into an advertisement, so just bear with me. But it goes, explains the vestments and like why they're there, even the ones that I don't have. So I don't have, again, the black fur that's typically worn at funerals, and rose that's worn on the different parts of the twice a year. Yeah, third Sunday of Advent and the fourth Sunday of Lent. So and it does have. Let's see, what else does it have? There's one thing that my wife pointed out that I totally missed, and I can't remember it. But yes, you did. So I just want to point it out. She did absolutely put him in a bad spot. But so if you're interested in getting one of these, I have a link to it in my description, and you can get 10% off your entire order from Shining Light Dolls. It's very, very durable. Again, it's got the outer vestment and then the inner vestments, and then his, oh my gosh, his clerics underneath. So it's pretty elaborate. I didn't expect this to be as elaborate as it was, but and he's ginger, so my wife always wanted a ginger. So this is not a replacement for a kid, but I don't think it's possible for us to have a ginger baby. I don't know. We haven't gone through all the permutations. So but yeah. So yeah, if you're interested, check in the description. If not, don't. That's fine. But yeah, thank you all for watching. I know this was like a much longer one. I didn't anticipate it to be an hour and 45 minutes. And I did want to make sure, last thing, I don't have anything personally against Jeffrey Quasnell. Like, I just want to be very emphatic about that, because that is one of the things that I am concerned about when I come on here. Is I do not want to give the impression that I hate a person, or that I'm not addressing or allowing someone to speak, right? Like, so that's why I continued to read his entire response, was because if I started his response, I went through the entirety of his response, because that's out of justice that needs to happen, right? So I'm very big on that, and I don't like it when people just kind of nitpick, because I wouldn't want to be nitpicked, and so I'm very much about giving everyone their due. So thank you for watching, and if you have any comments, questions, leave them in the comment section. I do plan, oh boy, when is it, to have a collab with Father John Brown, and we're going to be talking about the state of the church, and we're going to be talking about the Catholic Project statistics, as well as the statistics from the Vatican on the state of the world church. And so that's going to happen. I just need to make sure, we just need to validate if it's going to be this Wednesday or sometime next week. So this Wednesday would probably be like 9 or 9:30 for an hour. So yeah, just letting you know. All right. So besides that, have a great night, and thanks for joining.